Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs, and in this video we are doing a pattern review and a sew along to one of the Simplicity Summer 2022 patterns. Well, it was from my pattern haul that I did, I want to say about a month ago. So we are doing a sew along for that pattern because in that video I said if I get 150 likes, I will do a sew along. Now before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe button, and also turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into this pattern review, then off to the sew along. All right, so you guys know that this is part of the 150 likes for Simplicity Summer 2022 pattern haul that I did. I'll put up the video for that one, which one it was that received more than 150 likes. So I'm doing the sew along for that. So the pattern that we are doing today is Simplicity 9580. It is a bag, hat, and necklace pattern. So let's go ahead and get into the pattern description, which I just told you what it is. So this pattern is basically, you have different bag options, you have a floppy hat, and you have a necklace in this pattern. Let's go ahead and talk about the skill level. So the skill level on Simplicity website is rated as average. Do I feel that it's average? No. I don't feel that it's average. However, I think when they say average pattern, I believe that they are talking about probably the necklace. Now, I have not done the necklace yet. The only one that I have done on this pattern is the hat, which we will discuss in this video. All right, let's talk about notions used. So the notions used for this pattern, all you need is thread and interfacing, lining fabric, main fabric. That's it. No buttons, no closures, no snaps, none of that. You just need some scrap fabric. So if you've seen my Instagram stories, then you will know that I showed my entire sewing room floor filled and covered with scrap fabric. Okay, so I cleaned up the entire scrap fabric, picked two fabrics that will go, and these are the two fabrics that I picked, this hat fabric and this, both from when I did So Much Colors series, 90s edition. So I just picked two fabrics from that and then just cut it out. The teal is the lining, the pinkish fabric is the main fabric, and just made it do what it did. All right, so let's talk about fabric used. So the fabric used for this pattern, if you guys seen my So Much Colors, then you will know that I will put it in the description box below. Both fabrics are from Joann's. The teal fabric and the main fabric are both from Joann's because I use all fabric from Joann's in order to do the hashtag So Much Colors 90s edition. All right, so that entire series, all the fabric is from Joann's, and I did make sure to put all the fabric in the description box for each video. All right, let's talk about pattern pieces. So for this pattern, it's only 3 pattern pieces. You have pattern piece number 13, 14, and 15. Pattern piece 13 is the hat crown. I believe it's the hat top. Pattern piece number, which is this portion right here. And then you have pattern piece number 14, the hat crown, which is this portion right here. And then you have pattern piece number 15, which is the brim. All right, so it comes together very, very quickly. The pattern sizing, I believe, is one size fit all. Yes, all sizes. So it's one size fit all for this pattern, which you can see the pattern right here. So one size fit all. Now, I do want to say that for the cutting, you have a small, medium, and large. The size that I cut, speaking of, you know, the size that I cut, I cut a medium. And I should have cut the large because it doesn't feel loose. It doesn't feel tight either. It feels just right for what I was going for. But if I wanted to make it really, really floppy, I should have cut the large, but I'm fine with the medium. It's not tight on my head or any of that stuff, so it would be kind of hard for it to fly off if it gets really, really windy. All right, all right, modifications. Did I make any modifications? No, I did not make any modifications to this pattern. However, there are some issues in the pattern, which I will get to here shortly on likes and dislikes. Let's talk about, did it look like the photos or the drawing on the pattern envelope? So Yes, it does. To me, I feel like it looks exactly like that beautiful photo right here. I wish I actually had that fabric, but I do not. So I made it do what it do. Okay, so yes, it does look like the photos in the drawing on the pattern envelope. Are the instructions easy to follow? So yes, for the most part, the instructions are easy to follow. However, in the instructions, there is a step, and I think it's step number 10. I'm gonna take a picture and pop it up. That portion right there is incorrect. And the reason why is because I did it exactly like that. And I noticed that you would not be able to sew right side together if you do the instructions like that. So what I did was I looked online for floppy hat because I have never done a floppy hat. And one thing that I noticed is what I thought to do before sewing that step together was make sure that you sew all of your main fabric together and then all of your lining, and then place right sides together and sew it together around the brim area. All right, just so you know, there is a sew along for it. However, I cut all that extra other stuff out and then sewed it together and stitched it up and everything, and it was good to go. All right, let's talk about likes and dislikes. Likes, I love the floppy hat. You guys will be surprised for me to even say I do not own a floppy hat. I do now. I have not owned a floppy hat in years, okay? In years. It's been a very long time owning a floppy hat because I was not close enough to a beach to wear a floppy hat, or, you know, on vacation, you know, to wear a floppy hat or whatnot. So I never owned one. So you may see a lot of floppy hats and a lot of photos and videos coming up this summer. Okay, I'm just warning you guys. All right, so let's talk about dislike. So the dislike is basically that the instructions just happen to be incorrect for the floppy hat towards the end, but it's not something that would completely trip you up unless you completely following with the instructions step by step. Okay, so it will trip you up towards the end. But like I said, I went to YouTube and I was just like, this don't sound right. Am I thinking what I'm thinking to do with this, you know, hat to make it work? Because when you have sewn so many things and you know it needs to be right side together and it's not clicking, you could instantly go to YouTube, another video, and like, hold on, let me type in floppy hat. And that's what I did. I typed in floppy hat and I was like, I knew to sew this this top hat and the crown to the main fabric of the brim and then to the lining and then attach it together. Duh, Rochelle. It did not click until after I seen the video. I cannot remember the YouTuber's channel that I seen, but it was a YouTuber that I seen that just basically drafted one, and I'll put it in the description box below on who it was. Okay, I'll do that for you guys. All right, first time experiences. So the only first time experience that I had was to sew a floppy hat. I have never done one. First time, and I love it. All right, would I sew it again? Absolutely. I kind of already said that. I would sew it again. I would recommend this pattern to other because guess what? It's only 3 pattern pieces. This is an hour-and-a-half sew. So the cutting process is like 20 minutes. It's only 3 pattern pieces. You cut 3 of your main fabric, 3 of your lining fabric. Interface all pieces, well, interface the pieces as stated in the pattern instructions. Hour-and-a-half sew. Super simple. I kid you not. So for my pattern rating, I'm going to rate this pattern a 5 out of 5. Yay! All right, even though outside of that little tricky situation towards the end of the instruction, this is a super easy sew, and I highly advise everyone to sew them a floppy hat for springtime when gardening season come around, or even in summertime when you're out around the beach. All right, well, that's it for the pattern review. I hope you enjoyed it. And now that I talked about the pattern review, let's go ahead and get right on to the sew along. All right, everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we are going to be sewing along to Simplicity 9580. This is part of the 150 likes that I received on my Simplicity Summer pattern hauls, and I said if I get 150 likes on the video, I will pick one pattern from that pattern haul in order to do a sew along. So this is the one that I chose only because you guys know I've been doing a lot of garment sewing, so I figured it was to do something quick and easy and something that, you know, you could wear right now in the summertime, okay? Now, before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe button, and also turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into this pattern, starting with the pattern pieces. All right, so the pattern pieces used for this pattern is pattern piece number 13, 14, and 15. So for pattern piece number 13, which is your hat top, you need to cut one of fabric, one of contrast fabric or lining, and then one of interfacing. Pattern piece number 14 is the hat crown. You need to cut one on the fold of fabric, one on the fold of lining, and then one on the fold of interfacing. Now my main fabric will be this colorful fabric that you have seen this before, and then I am using this teal fabric as my lining fabric. So you have seen both fabrics before because I used them during hashtag so much colors. And the last pattern piece is pattern piece number 15. You need to cut one on the fold of fabric, one on the fold of interfacing, and then you need to interface both pieces, both your fabric piece and your lining piece. Now on pattern piece number 13, you just need to interface the fabric, whichever one is your main fabric. And then on pattern piece number 14, you just need to interface the one that you will use for your main fabric. Now that's all the pattern pieces that you need in order to construct this hat. We are doing view E on this pattern. So let's go ahead and talk about the tools and supplies that you need in order to construct this hat. All right, so the tools and supplies that you need in order to construct this hat, you just basically need thread. You don't need anything else, no closures whatsoever. So this would be a super simple pattern to do. Now that we talked about the tools and supplies that you need in order to construct this hat, let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing. All right, so we'll go ahead and grab pattern piece number 14, the fabric one, or your main fabric for pattern piece number 14, which is your hat crown. And what you're going to do is, with right sides together, you're going to pin at the notch top and bottom. This is your center back, so go ahead and pin at that notch top and bottom. And then after you pin it using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew your center back seam together and press them open. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the hat crown sewn together, the next thing you're going to do, so basically the next thing you're going to do is clip to the stitching. So basically what you want to do is go ahead and grab your scissors. Now before you clip to the stitching, I went ahead and created a stitching line 5/8 of an inch from the top where you have the notches. So if you hold your head up like this, I just created a stitching line like you can see here. Now what I'm going to do now is basically clip to the stitching without going through the stitching all the way around. So go ahead and clip to the stitching now. Now that I have it clipped to the stitching, go ahead and grab pattern piece number 13, which is your hat top right here. And then what you want to do is, with right sides together, you want to pin your hat top to your hat crown, right sides together, and you want to match up the notches. So if you remember where you made those notches, just go ahead and get your pattern piece, and you should have 2 notches. So just make sure that this is the center back like this, and then you should have a notch that matches up with that. So this is my first notch right here. So I'm going to take my hat top and I'm just going to put a pin right there and a pin on the other side as well, which is right here, since I have already clipped it. And then what you want to do is look for the notches that you made. Like I have one right here. I'm just going to make sure I clip it a little bit more so you can see it. All right, so now that I have it clipped, I'm just going to pin with right sides together. I'm going to pin this notch to this notch. And it's going to be very difficult for you to do this, but you want to pin that other notch to the other pin, okay? It's very difficult, so just be careful. on pinning them, okay, together. And then you're just going to pin all the way around. This part right here is, like I said, very difficult to do, so just be careful with your pinning all the way around. So go ahead and pin all the way around now. Alright, so now that I have the hat top attached to my hat crown, this is the top, pattern piece number 13 to pattern piece number 14, right sides together. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're just going to start at the center back, and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and sew all the way around and back stitch at the end. Once you do that, go ahead and trim your seam allowance down, clip into your curve, and then press your hat top. You want to press all your seam towards the top of your hat, okay? So go ahead and do that now. Now that we have the hat top attached to the hat crown, and we trimmed it down, well, I trimmed it down, and then I pressed my seams towards the hat top. Go ahead and move your hat out of the way for a second and grab your hat brim, which is pattern piece number 15. That should look like this. And what you're going to do is, with right sides together, you're going to sew the center back seam once again like you did for the hat crown. So go ahead and pin at the notches, pin at the top, and pin at the bottom. So go ahead and do that now. So now that you have your center back seam pin, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end and press your seams open. And then also do the same thing to your lining piece. Go ahead and pin your lining piece for your brim using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end and press your seams open. Go ahead and do your hat brim now. Alright, so now that I have the brim of the main fabric and the lining fabric sewn together with right sides together, and I attach using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I also, on the main fabric, I went ahead and created a 5/8 of an inch stitching line using a regular length stitch. So now that I did that, what you're going to do is, with right sides together, you're going to go ahead and pin the lining onto your main fabric, right sides together, match up those seams, and you're going to pin. You're basically going to pin all the way around. So go ahead and pin all the way around your brim now. Now you're going to pin the outer edge of your brim. So just make sure you're matching up those center notches, or center back notches I should say, and pin there, and then pin all the way around the outer seam of your brim. Go ahead and do that now. Alright, now that I have the lining pinned onto my main fabric, right sides together, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning, so all the way around your brim, and then back stitch at the end. Once you do that, you're going to trim your seam allowance down and clip into your curves, just like make a couple of snips to where it'll lay flat. Go ahead and do that now. Once you do that, turn your brim right side out and give it a good press. Go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now that I have the brim attached with right sides together, I attached the lining to the main fabric, I trimmed it down, I clipped all the way around. So the next thing you're going to do is go ahead and turn your brim right side out. Once you turn it right side out, what you want to do is go ahead and give it a good press, and then top stitch along the edge using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now that I have the brim stitched right sides together, I stitched the lining to the brim. I went ahead and trimmed it down, pressed it, turned it out, and then stitched at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I did all of that. So now you have, I also did the lining. So for the lining, you needed to stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the bottom and at the top along that edge. And then at the center back, you needed to attach at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, but leave an opening for turning. And then I attached the hat top right here to the hat crown, like I did for the main fabric that I walked you through, okay? Now, in the instructions, I'm going to show you the instructions right quick. So right now we are actually on step number 9. It wants you to pin the crown lining to the top lining and all that jazz. Now, you will have a difficult time trying to pin the main fabric to the lining fabric to the main fabric and then try to attach it to the brim. So I'm going to do it a little different. What I'm going to do is attach this lining to the lining brim and then attach this lining, the main fabric, to the main fabric brim and then attach them together. That's what I'm going to do because I think it would make more sense to do it that way instead of the other way that it wants you to do. So what I'm going to do is, with right sides together, I'm going to take my lining fabric and pin right there at the lining at the center back seam, and I'm going to pin there, and I'm going to pin all the way around. So go ahead and pin all the way around for your lining, and then you're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then do the same thing for your main fabric, sewing at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and then I'll show you how to attach both of them together. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I have my lining done attached to my brim. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach my main fabric to my brim. So you want to kind of push all of your fabric to the inside of the brim, and then just pin all the way around, and then go to your sewing machine using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning, and then sew all the way around and back stitch at the end. Do that now, and then I'll show you how to attach both of your brims together. Do that now. All right, so now that I have the lining of the hat attached to the brim and my main fabric attached to my brim as well, now what I'm going to do is turn my hat right side out through this lining. So you're just going to make sure your lining is, you left the opening large enough for you to pull it out without ripping through stitches. So just pull lightly, do not pull it too hard to rip out any stitching whatsoever. So just go ahead and pull your hat through that opening now. All right, so now that you have your hat through your opening, the only thing that's left for you to do is go ahead and you could do it with the machine. You could do it with your sewing machine and just stitch at about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to close that stitching up, and then give your hat a good press. If you have any stitching that is showing like I do, just go ahead and take those out, give it a good press, and wear your hat, and you are all done with this sew along. If you decide to make this hat, go ahead and tag me on Instagram at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and until next time. All right, so there you have it. That is the complete pattern review and the sew along for Simplicity 9580. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you enjoyed the pattern that I chose. I wanted something beginner friendly that you guys will like, because I know I've been doing a lot of garment sewing and I want to get into some of the accessory things that I have picked up as well. I will be doing another sew along for another one of the Simplicity Summer 2022 patterns that I picked up, so stay tuned for that as well. But don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video, and as always, keep sewing.